When Phoenix Spencer Horn's boyfriend dialed 999 and confessed, his calm voice hit a weekend of horror. What unfolded was not just the murder of a young woman, but a chilling tale of love twisted into control, deception, and unimaginable brutality. This is her story. Phoenix was more than a case in a courtroom. She was someone's daughter, someone's friend, someone's safe place. At just 21, her life was already painted with ambition and kindness. People who knew her speak of a spirit that was hardworking yet gentle, playful yet grounded. Her best friend, Grace McCabe, once said, "If you were having the worst day, Phoenix would sit with you until you believed in yourself again." She didn't give up on people, those who worked alongside. She had a way of turning routine into warmth. She dreamed of building a future in hospitality, not just as a job, but as a career where she could make others feel at home. To Phoenix, kindness wasn't an effort, it was instinct. She carried that into her work, her friendships, her family. For many, Phoenix was that friend. Phoenix met Ewan, as so many young people do, through shared circles. At first, he was everything a storybook romance promised: charming, attentive, the perfect boyfriend. He opened doors, sent sweet messages, played the role of someone who cared deeply, but control often wears a mask. What started as compliments about her beauty turned into subtle criticisms about her clothes. What seemed like affection, "Text me when you get home," slowly morphed into demands. "Why didn't you answer me right away?" Friends noticed small changes. Phoenix began explaining his possessiveness as loneliness. This is how coercive control begins. By 2015, the UK legally recognized this pattern. Coercive control became a crime. It describes exactly what Phoenix was enduring. Manipulation that chips away at independence until love becomes fear. The data is clear. In 2022, police recorded 43,944 coercive control offenses in England and Wales, ONS. Each number is a life quietly shaped by fear, often without visible scars. For Phoenix, it was the start of a storm she didn't yet see. Engagement cue. Would you recognize the difference between love and control if it was happening to you? November 16th, 2024, began like so many ordinary days. Phoenix woke up with her usual energy, preparing for another evening at the Strathaven Hotel. She had become a fixture there, the young woman who greeted guests with a smile that made even the longest shifts feel easier. To her colleagues, Phoenix wasn't just another employee. She was the kind of person who brought warmth into a cold November night. That evening, she spoke about her dinner plans with Ewan. To those listening, it sounded like any other relationship ritual. There was laughter. There was normalcy. Nothing, on the surface, suggested danger. Phoenix carried herself the way she always did, with kindness, professionalism, and a spark that lit up the hotel lobby. After her shift, she headed home. It should have been uneventful. A young woman, tired but content, ready to enjoy dinner with the man she believed loved her. But as she entered her flat, the tone of the night began to shift. Her phone lit up repeatedly with Ewan's messages. At first, they seemed harmless, claims of loneliness, subtle requests for reassurance. But woven into them was the familiar thread of control. It wasn't simply, "I miss you." It was, "Why aren't you here? Why don't you care enough?" Still, Phoenix did what she always did. She tried to soothe, to reassure. At 9:37 p.m., she sent a final text to her mother. Just a simple update about her evening. Casual and calm. Nothing in her words hinted at fear. Nothing suggested it would be her last message. Later, neighbors recalled hearing noises from her flat around midnight. Unusual sounds, thuds, raised voices. A disturbance that broke the quiet of the night. But these are the moments we often dismiss. No one expects violence to be unfolding just a few feet away. No one imagines the unimaginable behind the thin walls of an ordinary building. Inside the flat, the night turned horrific. What Phoenix endured cannot be softened by language. Forensic experts would later confirm the chilling details. 3 separate knives used, evidence of strangulation, movements tracked by digital data. Each fact layered the grim reality of what happened between those walls. Yet in telling her story, it is crucial to remember this. Phoenix's final moments do not define her life. They define him. The brutality speaks to his choices, his violence, his unraveling. Phoenix was not the sum of those final hours. She was the light extinguished by his darkness. When investigators pieced together the scene, they didn't just see a crime. They saw the pattern of control and obsession that had been building, hidden beneath charm and excuses. What happened that night wasn't random. It was the final, devastating act of a cycle too often overlooked until it is too late. Engagement cue. The last message Phoenix sent was full of normalcy. Dinner with her boyfriend. Hours later, her life would be gone. What happened after Phoenix's death is almost more chilling than the act itself. Violence, as horrific as it is, often comes with an expectation of chaos, panic, remorse, breakdown. In the hours after the attack, he didn't rush for help. He didn't call anyone. Instead, he turned to concealment. Investigators later found evidence that he had attempted to dismember Phoenix's body, not out of rage, but with the eerie calmness of someone trying to erase evidence. He draped a towel over her, as if covering the truth could somehow undo what had been done. That single act, banal yet horrifying, showed how quickly he shifted from violence to cover-up. Then came the performance. He picked up her phone and texted her mother, pretending to be Phoenix. The words were casual, crafted to maintain the illusion that she was alive. To Allison, her mother, those messages were both a lifeline and a dagger. She wanted to believe them. Who wouldn't? But as later revealed, the tone was off. The phrasing was different. A mother's intuition whispered something was wrong, but denial can be powerful. Sometimes, we hold on to hope, even when the truth is clawing at the door. Meanwhile, Phoenix's body remained in the flat, her presence silenced, her absence covered with lies. And what did Ewan do? He bought drugs. He watched pornography. He carried on with the mundanity of life, as though nothing had happened. That grotesque duality. A murdered young woman, lying in the next room while he scrolled through his phone, is something that haunts investigators to this day. Psychologists call this behavior post-crime normalization. In Ewan's case, it seemed to be both. This wasn't the image of a man broken by regret. It was the image of someone who understood what he had done and chose deception over confession. His actions suggest calculation, not collapse. He wasn't spiraling. He was covering tracks, rehearsing lies, performing a grotesque charade in which Phoenix still existed, at least in digital form. The cruelty is layered. It wasn't just that Phoenix's life was taken. It was that her voice was stolen and imitated, her mother forced to read words typed by her daughter's killer. For Allison, those texts would later become unbearable reminders, proof not of life, but of loss, manipulation, and betrayal. 2 days after Phoenix's life was taken, the silence broke. Ewan, the man who had stolen her future, picked up the phone and dialed 999. His voice was steady, almost unnervingly so. "I had a psychotic break," he told the operator, "and killed my wife." The words were clinical, detached, the kind you'd expect in a scripted drama, not in the raw chaos of real life. But Phoenix wasn't his wife. That slip of the tongue carried weight. Was it delusion, a mistake, or part of a story he was carefully crafting? When questioned, he spoke of drugs, steroids, and blackouts. He painted a picture of himself as someone overwhelmed by forces beyond his control. He tried to frame the horror as an accident of the mind, not the deliberate choices of his hands. It was a performance, a narrative, where he was not the aggressor, but another casualty. But the evidence didn't bend to his words. When officers arrived, the flat told its own story. Phoenix's mutilated body lay beneath a towel, hidden in plain sight. 3 knives were scattered, mute witnesses to what had unfolded. The scene was not one of sudden madness, but of prolonged violence, choices repeated over minutes, not seconds. The officers who responded would later testify about what struck them most, not the brutality of the crime, but the calmness of the man who confessed to it. He wasn't trembling. He wasn't panicked. There were no tears, no collapse. Instead, he spoke as though rehearsing lines, justifications, explanations, excuses. To investigators, it became clear that his version of events was less about truth and more about self-preservation. The psychotic break claim was convenient. It offered an escape route, a plea for diminished responsibility. The fake texts sent to Phoenix's mother after she was already gone, those details revealed not confusion but intent. Forensic psychologists often note that genuine psychotic breaks leave behind chaos, disorganized actions, incoherent speech, fragmented memories. What they found here was different. Methodical choices, structured lies, and attempts to conceal. In that courtroom later, his call became a focal point. Was it the confession of a man lost to madness, or the manipulation of someone hoping to twist the narrative in his favor? The jurors, the family, the public, they all had to weigh those words against the silent testimony of the evidence. And yet, beyond the legal questions, lies a deeper one for all of us. Ewan entered the courtroom with the same detached composure that had unsettled police officers on the night of his arrest. But the prosecution was ready. Their task was to strip away his excuses, the claims of drugs, steroids, and mental breaks, and reveal the deliberate choices that ended Phoenix's life. The evidence spoke louder than his words ever could. Phone records showed his movements that night, methodical and deliberate. There was no sudden blackout, no uncontrolled frenzy. Instead, data mapped out a chilling sequence. The arguments, the violence, the attempts to conceal what he had done. A delivery driver's testimony added another layer. He recalled seeing Ewan in the hours after Phoenix's death. Not frantic, not broken, but disturbingly calm. That calmness was echoed in his fake text messages to Phoenix's mother, cruel attempts to convince her family that Phoenix was still alive, even as her body lay hidden in the flat. Each of those texts wasn't just deception. They were proof of intent, proof of planning, proof of a man who knew exactly what he was doing. The defense tried to argue diminished responsibility. They painted him as unstable, influenced by substances, trapped in a fog of mental collapse. But the prosecution dismantled it piece by piece. His internet searches, his calm drug purchases, his decision to watch pornography in the aftermath, all of it painted a picture not of madness, but of a man disturbingly in control. When Judge Lord Matthews delivered his sentence, the courtroom held its breath. Life imprisonment, with a minimum term of 23 years. His words cut through the silence, a reminder that excuses do not erase choices, that cruelty does not get softened by claims of breakdowns. For Phoenix's family, justice came wrapped in pain. They sat in the courtroom, staring at the man who had stolen their daughter, their sister, their friend. The relief was there, relief that he would not walk free anytime soon. But behind that relief was a question that burned deeper. How can 23 years ever measure against a life cut short at just 21? Outside the courtroom, the public reaction was a mix of grief and outrage. Social media filled with her name, with candles, with tributes, with calls for stronger protections for women. Many said the sentence was not enough. Others clung to it as a sign that the justice system had, at the very least, recognized the brutality of what had happened. And yet, the emptiness remained. Phoenix would never walk through her front door again. Her laughter would never echo in the rooms she once lit up. No sentence could restore that. No number of years could ever balance the scales. Engagement cue. 23 years is that justice for a life stolen at just 21? What do you think? Was this sentence enough? Or does justice need to go further in cases like Phoenix's? Phoenix's death did not silence her. If anything, it amplified her voice in ways she could never have imagined. At just 21 years old, her life was taken from her in the most horrific way, but the memory of who she was has sparked something larger than one life, one crime, or one courtroom verdict. Her family continues to live with unbearable grief. Her mother, Allison, describes waking up each morning with a hollow ache, a question that can never be answered. Why, Phoenix? For a parent, the pain of losing a child is impossible to measure, but Allison has also chosen to transform that grief into action. She speaks out, not just about her daughter's story, but about the hidden dangers of coercive control, manipulation, and emotional abuse. In interviews, she reminds the world that Phoenix was not a statistic. She was a bright, kind, determined young woman who deserved safety and love. In the weeks after her murder, donations poured into Women's Aid in Phoenix's memory. Strangers across Scotland, and even beyond the UK, reached out. People who never met Phoenix carried her name into vigils, marches, and online campaigns. It became more than mourning. It became a vow. Never again. Domestic violence is often painted as a private matter, something that happens behind closed doors. But Phoenix's story shattered that illusion. This is not a personal issue. It is a public one. According to the UK's Office for National Statistics, millions of women live with the shadow of domestic abuse each year. Many never come forward. Many never make it out. Phoenix's life, and her loss, forces us to confront that reality. Silence kills. Her story also reveals how dangerous coercive control can be. It rarely begins with violence. It begins with isolation, with jealousy framed as care, with criticism disguised as love. By the time it escalates, victims often feel trapped, convinced that leaving would be more dangerous than staying. Phoenix's life shows us how those red flags should never be ignored. Her legacy, however, is not only tragedy, it is a call to action, to check in on your friends, to listen when someone confides in you, to speak up when something feels wrong, even if it's uncomfortable, to refuse to let fear and silence protect abusers. Phoenix's name now symbolizes not just a young woman whose life was stolen, but a movement to protect others. Her light, her kindness, and her dreams live on in every person who dares to say, "This has to stop." Engagement cue. Phoenix's story doesn't end in silence. It fuels a movement to protect others, to make sure her light never dies out. If this story moved you, don't let it fade away. Share Phoenix's name. Talk about coercive control. Like this video. Leave a comment. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe for more stories that demand awareness.